For more on this, let's bring in Chris Stirewalt. He is Fox News politics editor and the editor of the Halftime Report. I have so many questions about this story. Yes, right. Well, I mean, let's start with the idea of, so Michael Cohen's the one that has gotten this ball rolling, that flagged to the White House that they did in fact have this recording and what was in it. Is that how you're understanding the story? I mean, that's how, for what Peter just said, that's what it sounds like.
If we're applying Occam's razor on the leak and say what is the most likely source, we would say who benefits from it. And the who benefits would be Michael Cohen, who is engaged in a very public negotiation with his former client. Cohen needs money. Cohen needs a pardon. Cohen has been increasingly urgent in first his pleas and then his warnings to Trump. Help me out here, or things could go badly for you. I might cooperate very fully. And we've heard Cohen in recent weeks that has said that he basically is ready to help the special counsel in his investigation, and that he is going to put the country and his family ahead of his allegiance to the president. These should all be very concerning things for Trump, and this strikes me as a pretty serious shot across the bow.
I heard you say recently on this wonderful program that it was as if he's walking around Washington wearing a sandwich board, saying,
yes,
Mr. President, please pardon me.
Pardon's here, money in the back. Yes, right here. I'm available.
The danger of making it so obvious, and with another volley like this one, isn't it that it just puts more, magnifies the public eye on this particular situation, and if the president did pardon him, it would make that everyone would be that much more critical of the president for having done it.
Well, look, this is going to spool out now over the next several weeks. And as we get closer to D-Day for the special counsel's office, and when we see their report and whether or not he can get the president to submit to an interview and all of that stuff, we'll find out later about those things. And we'll find out what Cohen's really being charged with. We'll find out whether the president can really help him. And all of that stuff, all of those details will come out. But I would say this, in terms of negotiating leverage for Cohen, I don't think this is this part of it. Now, we don't know what's on the recording, but if the point of the leak is to reveal that the president knew about it and talked to him, I don't think that you're going to do that much political harm to Trump, in the sense that this is already priced in. This is assumed, as much as was the case with the alleged dalliance between Trump and the sex worker, Stormy Daniels, that it was like, well, of course. And it's fine. It's not that it's fine, but it's just priced in. So I don't know that this has the shock value there. The question is there legal exposure?
Right, and if you read the text of the story, what they're claiming is there was a conversation, should we do this? The president said, he wasn't on the side of doing it, but if you do it, use a check so that we can have a record of it. So it sounds almost like it's almost in the president's favor to have this recording out there, which makes me think that maybe what Michael Cohen is doing is saying, guess what, since I have this recording, I have a million others. And this one may be okay, but the rest of them are much worse. Could that be what he's trying to do?
That is certainly possible. And Rudy, president didn't do it, because the legal question here, the matter of law here is, if the president tried to arrange payment to a woman in hush money for the purposes of his campaign, then that's money that should have been reported and should have been disclosed. Now, it may sound like a technicality, but that's a crime. And that's where it becomes a different thing. Now, there's no intimation here that that's the case, but certainly that's where the danger is in all of this for Trump.
It is, although when you lay it out like that, you say hush money about what? I mean, like, this is something we already know. All of it. I mean, that's what makes it all a little bit improbable, is why would he bother paying off people when from Marla Maples on down, like,
when this occurred, when this was going on, my friend, the president was the then candidate was in the throes of a absolutely nuclear blast level sex scandals all around him. One more log on that bonfire would have been bad news for him at the time, for sure.
I don't know. Well, okay. Well, we'll have to debate that later, because
yes, ma'am.
I mean, the fire was huge, so what difference does another spark make? But Chris Stirewalt, thank you.
You bet.
President Trump's performance during his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin getting widely panned back home. How are other world leaders reacting? Joining me now is Niall Gardner from the Heritage Foundation. He is a former aide to British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Niall, thank you for joining us. What's your take?
Well, first, it's great to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation. I've just actually come back from London, spent the last 2 weeks in Europe. Without a doubt, I think that across much of Europe there's been a very negative reaction to the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki. I think that many in Europe view it as a missed opportunity, actually, to stand up to Vladimir Putin. And so I think in the eyes of many European leaders, also in the eyes of much of the European media as well, this wasn't the finest moment for President Trump on the world stage.
How do they know that he didn't stand up to Putin? They weren't in the room.
Well, that's a good point. We don't know all the details there, but you know, so far, you know, we don't have much information about exactly what was discussed. I do hope the president stood up to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. We don't have the information yet, but from the press conference that the two leaders held, there was certainly, I think, an overwhelming sense in Europe that the president was not standing up to Vladimir Putin, and they believe that the United States was, you know, undermined on the world stage, actually.
You know, do they feel that Germany was standing up to Vladimir Putin when they built a pipeline that would, you know, send so much financial benefit into Russia, as everyone else is sanctioning them?
Yeah, so at the NATO summit, of course, President Trump rightly condemned Germany's support for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Germany and Russia, which works to the benefit of the Russians. And he called out German Chancellor Angela Merkel over this, and he described this as really as appeasement of the Russians. That was absolutely the right message for the president to send in Brussels. I think, though, he should have sent the same kind of message, actually, to Vladimir Putin directly in Helsinki, standing up to the Russian leader, basically declaring that Russia's role in Europe right now is deeply unhelpful, and calling on the Russians to withdraw from Ukraine and the occupation of Crimea. That, I think, should have been the approach taken by the president.
Well, some say money talks louder than words, but one thing he could do, Mark Thiessen wrote an essay suggesting that President Trump should move troops into Poland, saying after spending the past week accusing him of being Putin's puppets, critics would look foolish if they turned around and criticized him then for antagonizing Russia. And after attacking him for undermining NATO, they could hardly complain that he is taking unprecedented action to shore up the alliance's eastern flank. What do you think? Is this a good idea?
Yeah, I think absolutely it's a good idea. We do need to see more U.S. forces in Eastern Europe. President Trump has actually strengthened the U.S. military presence, actually, in the Baltic states and Eastern Europe in general. This sends the right signal, I think, to Vladimir Putin. And it's vital, I think, that the president reinforces the already very robust positions of his own administration. After all, the Trump administration has been tougher on Russia, actually, than any U.S. administration since the days of Ronald Reagan. And I think that just needs to be backed up personally by the president himself. I hope he does so when Vladimir Putin comes to Washington. You don't think he's approving any
of those moves? You think that those people in his administration are taking those moves on their own without him?
No, I think that the president has been intricately involved in all of these decisions, and I think that the president himself, though, should personally confront Vladimir Putin, stand up to him. The United States is the leader of the free world. We need to see strength and resolve projected at every level of the administration, starting at the very top. And I do hope the president will do so when he faces Vladimir Putin again in the fall.
And do you think that that meeting is a good idea? I mean, we heard Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, say, of course, we want leaders of strong nations to get together. That is through discussion that we negotiate our differences. And there are others who, you saw Marie Harf in this segment before you, saying that this is a terrible idea to welcome into the White House. I'm paraphrasing. She didn't say terrible, but she didn't look thrilled about it. What do you think?
Well, I think that, Vladimir Putin certainly does not deserve to be stepping on U.S. soil after everything he's done against the United States and the free world. But it is what it is. The decision has been made. Vladimir Putin's coming over. I think the administration must now project real strength and resolve against Moscow at this summit. So I do hope the president will make the most of it and confront Putin.
Niall Gardner, thank you.
We begin with breaking news. President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, secretly recorded a conversation with the president about possibly giving a former Playboy model hush money 2 months before the 2016 election. That's what a source familiar with the investigation tells Fox News. I'm Rick Leventhal, in for Shepard Smith. The New York Times broke the story this afternoon. Fox News has confirmed President Trump and Cohen discussed making payments to model Karen McDougal, who claimed she had an affair with the president in 2006. President Trump denies the relationship. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says the payment never happened. FBI agents apparently seized the recording when they raided Cohen's office in New York City back in April. The feds are looking into Cohen's involvement in paying women to keep quiet about alleged relationships with Mr. Trump leading up to the 2016 election and whether that violated campaign finance laws. Cohen admits paying porn star Stormy Daniels $130,000 in exchange for her silence. Daniels claims she had sex with the president a decade before he took office. President Trump denies it. Laura Ingle is live near Bedminster, New Jersey, where President Trump is heading in a few minutes to spend the weekend at his golf club. Laura?
Hi, Rick. Well, sources tell Fox News a payment was discussed but never made between then-candidate Trump or Michael Cohen. This is in 2016. Now, the call about this possible payment, the back and forth over it, was recorded by Michael Cohen, according to these sources who say he secretly made a tape without his client's knowledge, meaning Mr. Trump did not know about this. The call lasted a reported 2 minutes, then was stored by Cohen in either his home, office, or apartment, and is now, as you mentioned, the subject of concern for all of the parties involved here. The woman Cohen and Trump were talking about is former Playboy playmate Karen McDougal, who claims she had a nearly year-long affair with President Trump in 2006. She has kept quiet about her alleged affair until this last April, after she won a lawsuit to break her non-disclosure agreement. Now, she sold her story to the company that owns the National Enquirer for $150,000 years ago, who essentially did what's called a catch and kill. They get the story and then they don't publish it. President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has told the New York Times there is a tape. He acknowledges that, but says the president, Rick, has done nothing wrong.
So, Laura, what's next for Michael Cohen?
Yeah, we've been following this closely. As you know, Cohen remains under federal investigation. We do want to mention he has not been charged with any crime. We have reached out to Cohen and his legal team for comment. We have not heard back. No word from the president today on this developing story, but he did say this about the raid on Cohen last month.
I mean, could you imagine if they burst into Barack Obama's lawyer's office? It would not be acceptable.
Now, last night, the special master in the federal case, which is going through all those documents that were seized at Michael Cohen's home, apartment, and office, filed a report with the court stating that only some of the documents will be privileged, over 1,000 in that raid, which means that there's a lot more that will not be privileged. No word yet on if which category this audio tape falls into, Rick. That'll be the next part.
Laura Ingle in Bedminster, New Jersey. Laura, thanks very much. Caroline Polisi is here now. She's a federal and white-collar criminal defense attorney. Caroline, I have so many questions. First and foremost, is the president at risk here?
Potentially. As Laura referenced there, the legal issue here isn't so much the hush money payoff or a confidentiality agreement or even a catch and kill practice on the part of the AMI, which is the parent company of the National Enquirer, which eventually did make that payment. The payment that they were talking about on the phone, apparently in this recording, never was made. I want to make that point.
Okay.
It never was paid. But the issue goes to a campaign finance law violation, and it could be a bigger issue in terms of a pattern or practice, and that's where the Stormy Daniels payment comes in as well, because look, $130,000, that's a slap on the wrist violation of campaign finance laws. If there are more women out there, potentially greater amounts of money out there, this could get to be really criminal.
Why would Michael Cohen record this conversation in the first place?
Yeah, we're all asking ourselves that question. I, as an attorney, have never recorded a call with a client. It's just not something you do if you're not worried about something or trying to cover yourself, really. So I think there's a real question there as to why this was a practice on the part of Michael Cohen, and there's a real question as to what else is out there. If it's likely he didn't just record this one tape, there's likely a lot more out there.
But it is is legal in New York for him to record, even if the person he's recording doesn't know it.
It is. It's called a single-party consent state. So yes, only one party needs to consent to that recording.
What about attorney-client privilege?
Right. So as you also referenced, so this information is now part of that larger federal criminal investigation going on in the Southern District of New York, and a special master has been appointed there. Judge Kimba Wood appointed a special master to decide what information would be privileged. We don't know whether or not this is falling under that category. Off the top of my head, yes, it would be attorney-client privilege information, but there's such a thing as the crime-brought exception, which would eviscerate that privilege, meaning if this could be shown in furtherance of a crime, then you would not have that privilege. The president would no longer maintain the privilege, and it could be turned over to authorities.
What I don't understand is why we even know about this recording. Why do we know about it? How do we know about it?
I don't know. That's a very good question, because as it stands now, again, you referenced it's being under seal.
Evidence. It's evidence in a case, potentially?
It is seized evidence. It's part of that April 9th raid on Michael Cohen's home office and hotel room. They seized everything that could potentially be incriminating to Michael Cohen, and so it's being culled through. Again, we're still in the beginning phases of this case. Michael Cohen has not been charged yet. That's a very important point to make. It's pre-indictment, so if he were to want to embark on a cooperation agreement with federal authorities, now would be the time to do it.
Well, I want to talk about Michael Cohen and his close relationship with the president. He told Vanity Fair, this was in September of last year, "I'm the guy who stops the leaks. I'm the guy who protects the president and the family. I'm the guy who would take a bullet for the president."
Right. And I think we've really seen a reinvention of Michael Cohen over the past couple of weeks. Michael Cohen 2.0, he's taken a 180. He did, of course, that interview that's gotten a lot of press, saying that he's no longer kind of the sacrificial lamb here for President Trump. He's not the fall guy here.
He talked to ABC. He told George Stephanopoulos, "My wife, my daughter, and my son have my first loyalty and always will. I put family and country first."
Right. He got a new attorney, Guy Petrillo, who's a former SDNY prosecutor. It's no secret that when you get a former prosecutor with the prosecuting office that's prosecuting you, you're looking to cut a deal. So, the guy that would take a bullet for President Trump, it looks like, well, he's going to put his own interests above Trump's at this point.
So just to be clear, the big potential issue here is election law. There's campaign finance law?
Correct.
Can you explain that?
Well, the question is whether or not that hush money payoff was for political purposes. And if that was a loan to the campaign, that's one issue. And then the disclosure issue is another. If the campaign didn't disclose that this was a campaign expenditure, that could potentially be criminal. Now, there are two
Criminal for whom? For the president?
For the president, it depends on his level of knowledge. For the president, for the organization. Remember, you have to reference John Edwards. So there was a failed criminal prosecution of John Edwards for campaign finance laws violation. It has to get to a level of knowing and willfully, so there's an intent level involved. It could end up just being a civil violation if you don't get over that knowledge hurdle.
On this recording, the president, according to his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says to Michael Cohen, you should write a check.
Right.
Because then there will be a record of it. So, right. And his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, suggests that means that the president is okay
right.
on this matter.
So Giuliani, I think, is trying to make lemonade out of lemons here, coming out saying that, this is actually quite exculpatory in the overall scheme of things. And the 2 points. One, yes, I think that is a good point on the part of the president, that he wanted it all papered up because, of course, checks, check stubs, those are able to be subpoenaed. There's a record there. There's a paper trail there. He's also making the point that the payment was never made, that this was the first time that he maybe knew about the AMI payment. Of course, it's questionable at what point in the storyline this potential payment talking about was made, and I think it's after that $150,000 payment to Karen McDougal. So there's a lot of questions about whether or not Cohen was in fact colluding with AMI on that payment. So many issues.
And the other issue that you mentioned, if he recorded this call, he most likely recorded other calls. Right. And the question is, what's on those other recordings, and which we obviously don't know.
Right. We don't know. And, to the question of cooperation and Michael Cohen, they already have these recordings. So it's not as though it's in the ball's in Michael Cohen's court at this point. Whatever recordings he made, well, the federal government now has. So it's a question.
Caroline Polisi.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Breaking news, the White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again?
Vladimir Putin coming
Did I
to
hear
the...
you? Did I hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be special.
Some lawmakers say there should not be another one-on-one meeting between the two leaders, since we're still trying to figure out what happened at the first one. White House correspondent Kevin Corke is live at the White House. Kevin?
Always good to be with you. As you pointed out, Trump, Putin too. Well, it could be coming to a White House near you. In fact, this very White House sometime this fall. That is depending on the details on both sides. But it would be Putin's first visit here, Rick, since 2005, if it does take place. But this is something the president and the White House continues to push forward. They say this is something, at least possibly, that could advance the agenda of the American people. A visit, by the way, the president also insists will not reduce pressure that his administration is placing on Moscow.
I have been far tougher on Russia than any president in many, many years, maybe ever. Even the big fight I have with Germany over the fact that they're taking natural gas, they're taking energy from Russia, paying them billions of dollars. But look at the sanctions I've put on. Look at the diplomats I threw out. Look at all of the things that I've done. Nobody else did what I've done. Obama didn't do it.
White House, meanwhile, their overture comes as Moscow, Rick, has released new videos of weapon systems that they say the U.S. can't defend, once again reminding everyone of the gamesmanship Moscow is fond of employing in situations like these, Rick.
And Kevin, the president getting some pushback on Capitol Hill today.
Yeah, no question about that. Number of Democrats obviously rejecting this idea of a possible summit here in Washington. In fact, Nancy Pelosi, within the hour, the Democrat from California, said this in a statement. President Trump's frightened fawning over Putin is an embarrassment and a grave threat to our democracy. She's not the only one on the left side of the aisle coming out against the president. Take it to Twitter. Chuck Schumer said this: until we know what happened in that 2-hour meeting in Helsinki, President Trump should have no more one-on-one interactions with Putin in the U.S., in Russia, or anywhere else. And while some on the right, as you can imagine, are calling this a chance to keep that conversation going, not everybody, Rick, on the GOP side of things is on board with a possible summit here in Washington. Check out Will Hurd, congressman from Texas. He said this in an op-ed. He said, by playing into Vladimir Putin's hands, the leader of the free world actively participated in a Russian disinformation campaign that legitimized Russian denial and weakened the credibility of the United States to both our friends and foes abroad. Tough words there indeed. A departure to New Jersey coming up in moments, but for now, back to you.
Kevin Corke at the White House. Kevin, thank you. So is President Trump doubling down or looking for a do-over? We'll have more on the possible motives behind the push for a second summit with a journalist who covered the first one. That's next. Now more on President Trump planning a second summit with Vladimir Putin, this time at the White House. Let's bring in Gregory Cordy, White House correspondent for USA Today. He covered the Helsinki summit and the president's meetings with NATO allies and the British Prime Minister. Thanks for being with us today, sir.
Absolutely.
The president has been criticized often since taking office, but we've never seen anything quite like this, especially criticism from his own party. And we're wondering if you think this new invitation will hurt or help.
Yeah, Newt Gingrich, who is a friend and a confidant and an ally of the president, called it the biggest mistake of his presidency on Monday. And so the timing of this announcement that President Trump is willing to go right back into another meeting with Vladimir Putin suggests one of two things. It could be that the president feels like the summit in Helsinki went so well that he wants to do it all over again. And just sort of defy his critics and his skeptics in the Democratic Party and in the media, and it should be said, even some in the Republican Party. Or, you know, it could also be a do-over, a chance to do the Helsinki summit all over again and say some of the things that he neglected to say in Helsinki that he's been roundly criticized for.
So what would that involve? What would this do-over be, Gregory? What would he do in the do-over?
Well, first of all, in Helsinki, he seemed to take Putin's side on the question of who he believed, his own intelligence agencies or Vladimir Putin, about Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. But also, you know, there's a whole other broad range of issues they didn't even get to because they seem so focused on this question of Russian interference that they didn't talk much about nuclear nonproliferation. President Trump didn't mention Crimea or the Ukraine at all. And so those more substantive issues could get a little bit more chance to breathe if the president can somehow put to bed these issues swirling around the Mueller investigation and possible collusion with Russia.
Well, Gregory, this morning the president said he's been far tougher on Russia than any president maybe ever, and called former President Obama a total patsy when it came to Russia.
Yeah, you know, I guess it depends on whether you consider the Soviet Union to be Russia, because from Kennedy to Reagan during the Cold War, we certainly had a number of presidents who were very tough on the Soviet Union. But this is the part of the president's line. He said it many, many times that he's far tougher. He's expelled a number of Russian diplomats, some of whom suspected of being spies. You know, he has enforced the sanctions that have been sort of forced upon him by Congress and were first imposed by President Obama. So, but that's the president's argument.
Yeah, it's been almost 10 years since a Russian leader visited the White House. The president says closer relations are a good thing, Gregory, but this is complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, a White House visit is different from meeting at a neutral third country like Finland. It suggests a warmth in U.S.-Russian relations that is, you know, might not be where we are at post-2014 when Russia annexed the Crimea from Ukraine. And so having Putin back at the White House would certainly be a further escalation of this détente that the president has been advocating for with Russia.
Gregory Cordy with USA Today. We appreciate your time, sir.
Absolutely.
Kevin Gork at the White House. Let's get a read on this and what he makes of it with Attorney Ted Williams. Ted, since you're an attorney and I'm not, is it unusual for a lawyer to tell his client?
It is very unusual, Neil, for a lawyer to tape his client. It is clearly something that I wouldn't do, and I don't know any lawyers that would do that kind of a thing. But I got to tell you, Neil, I think we need to chill a little bit, because we may be dealing with a nut-burger here. There's a great deal of speculation of what was said in these 2 minutes on the tape. I don't know what Trump was saying. Maybe if you speculate, he was trying to cover up an affair that he may have had or may not have had. But the question is, Cohen, just think about it, Neil. For months now, we've heard that Michael Cohen wants to sing. He's been on Good Morning America. He's been on numerous programs saying, I want to sing. Well, the big question is, do the United States Attorney's Office, does he have anything of value to give them? It seems to me you wouldn't run the Good Morning America or the New York Times before you'd run to the U.S. Attorney's Office and sing there. And so I'm very troubled by all of this.
Yeah, it just seems a little weird to me because, all right, so he recorded the conversations, which is kind of freaky in and of itself. Then you got to wonder, all right, what's damning on a conversation where the two were talking or discussing this, unless campaign funds were used or discussed, and we're told that never came up, and Rudy Giuliani has said as much. There's no there, right?
Well, Neil, let me just say this to you and the viewers. If Cohen had something of tremendous value, the U.S. Attorney's Office would be beating Cohen's door down to have him to come in and do what is known as a Queen for a Day acknowledgement, and that is where Cohen would come in and tell the U.S. Attorney's Office what he had. If they wanted it, then they could grant him immunity. None of that has happened. There may be a possibility that the U.S. Attorney's Office is saying, I don't give a damn about Cohen and what he has to say, because he has nothing to say that we don't already have.
And what about the means by which we got it? You mentioned at the outset that his office, his home was raided. I mean, that's not an everyday event. And if this is the result of that, I mean, that's a tough one to justify a raid after the fact, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is, but I got to tell you, the danger for Trump and Cohen is not maybe in this tape concerning an alleged affair. The danger is how many other tapes that Cohen may have very well made with Trump that could very well be damaging.
All right, so I'm thinking at the time he was speaking about his, Cohen to I think George Stephanopoulos, that his obligation is first to his family and his children. Is all this setting up someone who's going to to rat or try to rat against the president?
That becomes a crock. What you have there is Cohen possibly trying to send a signal to Trump, hey, look, you may need to pardon me, because if you don't pardon me, I'm going to sing, I'm going to look out for my family. It's just not crystallized.
Well, there's nothing to sing about, and he's just playing that game, right?
That's it. We don't know one way or another, Neil. That's it. And that's one reason we're left all to speculate out here. And I would tell everybody to chill out. I would also tell Cohen, not Cohen, but the president's lawyer, Giuliani, shut up. You're a lawyer. You're supposed to just see what, if anything, comes out of this. Trying to spin this thing at this time, you're harming your client.
All right, let me write that down, Ted. Shut up, you're a lawyer. All right, Ted, thank you very much.
It is incredibly valuable to the people of the United States of America that President Putin and President Trump continue to engage in dialogue to resolve the difficult issues that our country is facing between each other. I think this makes enormous sense, and I'm very hopeful that that meeting will take place.
All right, so better to talk than not, despite the criticism that the president maybe could have done better in Finland from the Secretary of State. Look, if they meet again, better that than not talking at all. Former CIA Director Leon Panetta. Leon, always good to have you. What do you make of that argument? Better to talk than not?
Neil, I'd feel a lot better about a second meeting if I knew what happened at the first meeting. I think the problem is that because they met without anybody present in the room, and the president has never really provided an explanation to the American people about what was discussed in that meeting, I think it's very difficult to go ahead with another meeting without at least knowing what was talked about and what they agreed to.
Wait a minute. When Bill Clinton met with Boris Yeltsin or others in the past have met one-on-one with Soviet and later Russian leaders, why should that be blabbed to the world anyway, especially those private conversations?
Neil, the President of the United States represents people of our country and our national security. When the President sits down with an adversary, I think the American people are entitled to know what that President discussed, particularly with Putin and Russia.
Did Bill Clinton share? I'm sorry to keep going, but this is an important point. Everyone's jumping on the president on this particular aspect, and whether he counted to the Russian or not, we don't know what happened in those private meetings. But having said that, why would you want to share that, and why would you want to get into the details of that? And when Bill Clinton would meet privately with Boris Yeltsin, I don't remember the world's, jumping to find out what they were discussing when they were on a bench in Hyde Park at the Roosevelt estate. So that's why I'm asking, why are we being fair? Because there are a lot of your colleagues, Leon, are saying, not only that, we want to get the interpreter who was in that room later on and question her. That's a very slippery slope. Even interpreters in the past are saying, that's nuts.
Neil, let's just talk about the basics here. The President of the United States, for the first time, has a meeting with Putin of Russia. And Russia is not our friend. They do everything they can to undermine our security in this country. If they have that kind of meeting, I think the President owes it to the American people to talk about what was discussed at that meeting, period. I don't think it's too much to ask that happened. President Clinton presented to the American people what was being discussed with individuals. And besides that, he had people in the room. He had note takers that were there that could summarize what they talked about. Here, we don't know what went on, and I think we're entitled to know. And frankly, if this was a good meeting, why wouldn't the President of the United States discuss with the American people what happened? Why do we now allow Putin to basically summarize what happened in that meeting? That's wrong.
Do you find it a little overzealous then to say, we want to see the notes, we want to talk to the interpreter, we want all this detail? I just realized Leon, think about it. We've never had a fuzzy, warm relationship, productive one, with the Russians ever. I mean, a lot of people wanted to know, JFK, right. How did you screw up your one-on-one with Nikita Khrushchev? Tell me what he said that just railroaded you. Or even with George Bush Sr., how did you stumble in those opening negotiations with Mikhail Gorbachev? We want to know what happened there. I mean, if you start going through meeting by meeting by meeting, I mean, you can make a case to justify it, but you can also make a case to those leaders who will ever meet with an American president, don't meet with the guy because it's going to be publicized to the world.
Neil, you're wrong. When others meet with the President of the United States, they usually have people in the room. They're willing to talk about issues that are familiar with each side, and they're willing to publicly go out and say what they talked about. That's always been the case. So please don't say that somehow this is the usual behavior for presidents meeting at summits.
Leon, with all great respect, Leon, with all great respect, think about what you're saying here. That you are saying then there's a move, we want to talk to the interpreter in that room and we want to question what was said.
I'm not saying that.
I know you're not saying that. So you are against some of these leading Democrats who are pushing it. You think that would be a mistake, right?
I'm not. I don't think we ought to talk to the interpreter. I think we ought to talk to the President and to the Secretary of State about what was discussed in that meeting. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so would you just think about this as far as consistency? You say this is very unusual what's going on right now. When John F. Kennedy was talking to Nikita Khrushchev and communicating, even through independent channels, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, should the world have been in on those discussions?
Well, the fact is, we know what went on in those discussions.
Much later, we knew what went on.
Yeah, but that was in the middle of a major crisis. This discussion took place in Helsinki, not in the middle of a major crisis, but two individuals coming together to discuss various issues that affect our countries. We're entitled to know what they talked about.
All right, so the big issue seems to be that a lot of people with a wink and a nod think that the president is beholden to Vladimir Putin, and his behavior seemed to indicate that he was, being exceptionally nice, exceptionally generous to him. So are you saying that because of that and that behavior, that alone warrants more of an investigation, more studying because something isn't up here? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think you and a lot of other people were very concerned, like myself, when the president stood up and said he trusts the Russians more than he trusts our own intelligence.
Absolutely, Leon, absolutely. I thought his behavior, absolutely on that. But I'm not quite comfortable going to the degree you are here, because I worry about the precedent this sets and what's been done in the past, where we start examining notes, where we start talking to people, where not everything is volunteered in these summits. I mean, we didn't learn every single detail from Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan in their Reykjavik discussions. So I'm just wondering, at what point do you say, this is worthy of examination, this is not?
I saw President Putin stand up. He's had 20 years of experience on Mr. Trump. He presented a clear set of talking points and made a clear case for what he thought was discussed and what was arrived at. I did not hear that from the President of the United States. And I think he should have presented what were the points they talked about and what did he agree to. I mean, the fact was, here is Russia saying, we agreed to be able to provide our own diplomats for them to question them. President Trump indicated that was not a problem. And then, of course, after opposition came out to that point, they retracted that. What was agreed to on that issue? Aren't we entitled to know?
You don't worry about what this does in the future for presidents or leaders of countries talking privately. You're suspicious because of their demeanor and how they carried themselves in that public venue. That's a justifiable concern, Leon. But you're not worried that what you're setting in stone here?
Neil, I served in the White House. There's not a president that I served with when he met with a major adversary, major person, did not sit down with his policymakers, did not have note takers in the room to take down the notes from that kind of meeting. That's all I'm asking for. And it's not too much to ask for, particularly when it involves our adversary.
All right, we will look at that, examine that, debate that, because it is a hot debate of that. Lee and Panetta, thank you very, very much.
The game coach came to me and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia.
Is Russia still targeting the U.S.? Is Russia still targeting the U.S., Mr. President? Press, let's go. Make your way out. No, you don't want that to be the case? Let's go. The president said thank you very much, was saying no to answering questions.
I let him know we can't have this. We're not going to have it. And that's the way it's going to be. Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had.
Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again? That's going to be special.
Well, that was special. 1 week watching from Monday to today. That's what we'll talk about this panel. Let's bring in our panel. Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner. A.B. Stoddard, Associate Editor at Real Clear Politics. And Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen. Mark, welcome aboard to the panel. Your thoughts looking back at this week and where we've ended up now at the end of the week.
Yeah, so, I mean, Donald Trump's press conference and his performance was cringeworthy, and watching him try to walk it back was cringeworthy as well. But if you look at his Russia policies, they're pretty good. In fact, there is a dramatic improvement over his predecessor. He expelled 60 Russian diplomats over Russia's chemical weapons attack in London. He's given $47 million to Ukraine in military aid, and just today they announced $200 million more in military aid to Ukraine. He's imposed new sanctions on Moscow for their violations of the INF Treaty. He got the NATO allies to kick in billions of dollars more. He's twice bombed Assad, Putin's ally. So if Vladimir Putin was trying to get more pro-Russia policies out of his support for Donald Trump, it kind of backfired on him.
On Capitol Hill, A.B., the outrage was kind of really high at the beginning of the week. It kind of petered out, but then it's at a steady kind of outrage, right?
Well, and the news of the second summit was sort of the last thing that everyone wanted to hear, and that it would be scheduled for the fall right around the timing of the midterm elections was not welcome. And so you saw a lot of like, I don't want to talk about that today, I'm busy. And they're actually privately, obviously, trying to dissuade the White House on this topic and hope that this never happens and that they can make it go away. So there are a lot of questions, obviously. There's about what happened in a 2-hour meeting that we know nothing about, that the Pentagon knows nothing about, that the Russia experts know nothing about, that the State Department officials who've devoted their careers to this know nothing about. This is the big concern, not what happened at the press conference. Everyone's moved past that. You know, Trump betrayed the country. He humiliated himself.
Not everyone. Not everyone's moved past that. If you listen to some Democrats,
but the point is that we really need to know if there were agreements and concessions made. We know now that there is news that the president has agreed to an agreement for Syria that Netanyahu and Putin came to. It's very complicated, involving who will control which troop movements by Iran and everything else. But basically, that's all we know. And then we know that the other thing was discussed was shot down by a 98-0 vote by the Senate, which we all saw yesterday. We need to find out what else happened at that meeting, and that's of grave concern.
Here is the House Minority Leader and the Secretary of State.
What is Putin blackmailing President Trump with, personally, politically, or financially? Whatever it is a level of blackmail that the American people cannot afford.
I think those allegations are absurd. This administration has been relentless in its efforts to deter Russia from its bad behavior. We inherited a situation where Russia was running all over the United States. These last few days have been, frankly, more heat than light.
The president tweeting earlier this afternoon, I got severely criticized by the fake news media for being too nice to President Putin. In the old days, they would call it diplomacy. If I was loud and vicious, I would have been criticized for being too tough. Remember when they said I was too tough with Chairman Kim? Hypocrites. Byron.
Well, the Pelosi stuff is just resistance fantasizing. I think that's pretty clear because of these hard policies that Mark was talking about. On the other hand, in handling this summit, the White House has really done a very bad job, it seems, of explaining to the American people what the president did. Other than the president saying this was really great, they haven't really explained what was accomplished. And then, having not explained that, they come out and say, let's do it again. I mean, we just had one. It appears that the president messed it up and wants a do-over, and that's kind of what it looks like. So if there's a reason that they've set some process in motion that calls for another meeting in the fall, that would be fine. But we've seen a White House that has simply not explained the substantive stuff that went on at this summit.
Now, speaking of summits, the forum out in Aspen, Dan Coates, the Director of National Intelligence, talking about the cyber threat specifically. Take a listen.
I'm concerned about a cyber 9/11. Let's say you shut down Wall Street for a week. What does that do to world markets and people's investments? What about an attack on the electric grid in New England in January? There are people out there playing this game of chess with us in ways that want to take us down, and we have to be better than they.
Now, Russia, Mark, is clearly one of them, but so is China, and so is Iran.
And North Korea as well. I mean, they spend millions and millions of dollars trying to infiltrate us. They brought down Sony Studios practically. So this is a major, major national security threat that we face, and it has to be taken seriously. And the president's got to learn to be able to separate collusion from the challenge of the cyber threat that is coming from Russia and all those countries that you indicated.
Do you think DNI Coates, his job is in jeopardy after kind of explaining pretty frankly his concerns?
I sure hope not. I think Coates is doing a great job. Trump needs good people around him. All these people are running around saying, with their hair on fire, saying that everybody should resign from the Trump administration over this press conference. He needs Mike Pompeo. He needs John Bolton. He needs Dan Coates. He needs these people around him, not because he can't handle the job, but because he's new to national security. He's only been president for 2 years. He wasn't working in this world before, and the good leaders surround themselves with really smart people and listen to them. And it seems right now that Trump needs to do that a little bit better.
Maybe the story was that Secretary Pompeo and Vice President Pence were part of the team that said the president had to kind of clean things up on aisle 5 after coming back to the U.S.
Right. The problems arise when he doesn't listen to his experts. And Mark's right. He has very, very qualified and credentialed people, public servants of great integrity working for him, like Dan Coates. And when they come, they're often not listened to. They're often not consulted. Dan Coates did not know he was going to have these people, Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, and others in the Oval Office last spring. He did not know that Putin was going to welcome at the White House this fall. Dan Coates was hung out to dry on the world stage by the president on Monday. And this is what happens, is the president, as he's grown into this job, has decided he doesn't always need to consult with them. And so we are also told that it was more what he saw on television than the words of Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo about turning this around that really made him come out with a clarification in an attempt to turn it around.
Has he turned it around?
No, he hasn't turned it around.
Has the Mike Cohen tapes turned it around?
We've got a new scandal to divert attention from the old scandal. As far as Coates is concerned, I don't think his job is in jeopardy, but you can imagine that they're quite irritated with him. It's like, if you want to hang out with Andrea Mitchell and her friends in Aspen, go ahead, but don't expect us to be happy about it.
The establishment. Next up, the Friday lightning round. Tariffs, Trump derangement syndrome here in D.C., maybe, plus winners and losers.
I raised 50, and they matched us. I said, you don't match us. You can't match us, because otherwise we're always going to be behind the eight ball. Will you ever get to 500, though? I'm ready to go to 500. Look, I'm not doing this for 20%? Politics. I'm doing this to do the right thing for our country.
Recently, U.S. officials made a lot of ridiculous remarks calling black white. They need to placate the people affected by the trade war.
trade war. It looks like we're heading that way. If it continues, we're back with the panel. We'll start there. Mark, $500 billion? I mean, that's a big number.
That is a big number. He said today that he'd be willing to put tariffs on every single Chinese product. Look, the American economy is booming thanks to Trump. He's passed historic tax cuts. The regulatory rollback has been incredible. And so now we've got record unemployment levels at lows, black unemployment low, Hispanic unemployment low. All of that is put in jeopardy by a trade war. And the Chinese in particular are very smart about how they're going to retaliate on this, because what they're doing is they're targeting the Trump voters. They're going after, for example, soybeans. There are 18 states that produce 96% of American soybeans, and all but 2 of them voted for Donald Trump. So these are the states that the Republicans have to win if they're going to take back the Senate. Missouri, Indiana, North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp. These senators a trade war is good for them because they can separate themselves from Trump and justify their separation from Donald Trump.
Quickly, is there support for this at all on Capitol Hill?
No. The political, even though right now there's no real macroeconomic consequence, and the White House will not tell the farmers in tweets, he's telling them you're going to win. What they won't tell them is the economy is so good we can take this. You can take this hit for us right now. But Republicans on Capitol Hill do not believe there's a plan. There's no long game here, that we're just going to continue to face retaliation. And the political window is changing. It's closing. I mean, 4 to 6 weeks from now, they're basically going to say to the president, okay, it didn't work, and we're really taking the hit at home. But they have to wait through the summer for him to keep talking, and they do not believe there's a plan.
Quickly.
I think the question is, if he keeps talking about things like $500 billion, the only question is, when does Capitol Hill actually get involved? Because unlike foreign policy in Russia, where he has an exclusive constitutional authority to do what he's doing, Congress has a role in this. And to sit back and let a $500 billion tariff go into effect, not going to happen. They're not going to do that.
All right, there are plenty of examples of what's called Trump derangement syndrome. I just wanted to play this bite from the late Dr. Charles Krauthammer.
They may not be personally deranged by his presence, but they have a base that has not recovered from the election, and they insist that anybody who represents them and does not want to face a primary fight or have a demonstration outside their house on a weekend will oppose what Trump is doing.
We missed that daily diagnosis. Let's do the winners and losers. Our winner first, then loser.
No, for me, the winner is the Russia hawks, because the drubbing that Donald Trump has taken because of that Putin press conference has further boxed him into this tough Russia policy. It makes him a lot harder if he gives anything away to Vladimir Putin.
Loser?
Loser is Bruce Willis, who announced this week against all that is holy and sacred that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie.
Oh, boo. Winner and loser, AB?
My winner is Vladimir Putin. Enough said. He had the best week, I think, of his career. And my loser is Dan Coates. And there actually is chatter about whether or not he will be fired, even though many Americans are wondering on Monday night if he would resign. I just think it's appalling. I hope that he gets to keep his job.
Winner and loser, Byron?
My winner is a family in Mount Dora, Florida. Had kind of a drab home. They decided to repaint it as an exact replica of Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night.
Wow.
The city did not like it, fined them $10,000, told them to change it.
Is the city the loser?
They went to court. Yeah, they are. They went to court and won, arguing that this had violated their First Amendment rights. So paint away, although maybe not next door to me. Loser is the British. They blew a chance to be in the World Cup finals. They are twisting themselves into a pretzel over Brexit, and they have lost their heads over Donald Trump. They are a complete mess, and things do not look like they're going to improve anytime soon.
I usually don't do winners and losers. However, the winner this week is the man we just saw, Dr. Charles Krauthammer, our late colleague and friend, because we talked about his book a lot on this show. Take a listen. Charles Krauthammer, who has a book out you may have heard of. Charles has now officially sold 1 million copies of his best-selling book, Things That Matter. I will sign you a copy, exactly, as you did for me.
Mine is still available.
Oh, there we go. I knew we had to get it in.
I do think that Things That Matter is going to stay on the New York Times bestseller list for a good while longer.
AB, you were correct. Things That Matter, #1, combined print and ebook, and #1 in paperback bestsellers this week.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
Awesome.
While the radical Dems in this country are losing their minds, or pretending to, over the president's meeting with Putin, German Chancellor Angela Merkel applauding the president's move to invite Putin back to the White House for a second summit. Merkel is wising up, it seems, telling reporters that meetings between the United States and Russia need to become normal once again, adding it's always good for everyone when there are talks, particularly when there are talks between these two countries. Well, Merkel has finally said something I agree with, and the president getting more support from foreign leaders than here at home. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says no more think of the audacity of this radical Dem. Schumer says no more one-on-one meetings between the president and Putin until the president tells him what happened during Monday's summit in Helsinki. That should inspire the quickest go to hell in the history of presidential politics. And if that reeks of left-wing hypocrisy, arrogance, and hubris, you might remember Senator Schumer not being so tough. Oh, look there. Who do we have there? There is Schumer with Mr. Putin when he decided to welcome him to New York in 2003. Coffee and donuts, obviously, at play, and Schumer's so happy to be in that photo. Amazing. Joining us now, the Dean of Political Strategist, Ed Rollins, Great America PAC Chairman, former Reagan White House Political Director, Fox Political Analyst. Great to have you with us.
As I said last night, President Putin had a very productive meeting. The two of them walked out of there pleased with what went on, and their statements, which I went back and read, are very profound. 4 questions were asked by 4 reporters got to ask questions. That became the whole issue of the things. It wasn't what the men said. It wasn't what they wanted to discuss. And my sense is the more of these debates, not debates, but the more of these summits we have, the better it'll be. And what Mr. Schumer needs to do this weekend is go back and read the Constitution. And in the Constitution, it says the president conducts foreign affairs. They don't conduct foreign affairs. They don't report to the majority leader, the minority leader of the Senate.
He needs to go to the dictionary and look up hubris and look at a picture of himself, which ought to please him to no end.
You see that every weekend.
I mean, that is arrogance beyond belief, sitting there telling the president what he wants. Who cares what Schumer wants? He is a minority leader. The president has made very few mistakes, but empowering him early by trying to persuade Schumer to be cooperative and bipartisan.
Well, it did work.
It's not a mistake. It was just a fruitless effort.
It created a clarity, though. The president's agenda is now the Republican agenda, and it's now the country's agenda. And as the Democrats are out there talking about their campaign of for the people, which every time you hear that slogan, you go, what does that mean? Of course, they're all for the people. What does that mean? But when you hear a great country needs a great leader, it's very clear who that is, and that's Donald Trump. And that should be his slogan.
Yeah, and when you hear "Keep America Great,"
right,
you know who the hell they're talking about.
Right, absolutely.
Let's turn to these tariffs. A lot of nonsense going on in the business press, in my opinion, where there seems to be little regard. You don't hear any discussion of the national savings rate, the impact of deficits, these massive deficits that the United States has run for the past 40-plus years, and particularly with China. And the impact on economic growth. You don't hear a lot of that. What you hear is fear-mongering and nonsense about equities markets, as if these news organizations, so-called, really understand economics. It is hilarious. This president is doing the responsible, mature, presidential thing. He is trying to assure that international trading systems are balanced, that they're fair, and that this idiocy commitment on the part of U.S. multinationals, about 150 of them principally, to free trade is, at a very high cost to this country.
What he needs to do is he's doing all the correct...
What he needs to do?
Just listen to me. Let me talk for a second. You speak with great clarity, and you communicate what his programs do. He needs to go out and speak with great clarity. He's implementing them.
Hell, Ed, he is speaking with great clarity every day.
Hear it because it's
he has educated more Americans in less than a year and a half about trade, its impact on our economy, than all of the economists in this country combined.
He's done the action. He now needs to do the speaking. Now needs to the preaching. The American public is not very sophisticated. They need to know what's happening, and this needs to be an economic campaign.
Americans aren't very sophisticated.
They're not on these kinds of issues.
The global elites aren't very damn sophisticated.
Well, we know that.
They're pigs at the trough. They have been so used to the establishments of both parties doing their bidding. This is what's driving them, and the reactionary politics that we're watching a result from both the Dems and the rhinos of the Republican Party. They're in their death throes, and they know it.
Well, he's got the big megaphone. He needs to go talk about these things. Talk to the country day after day after day. You do it night after night. He needs to do it day after day.
Okay, we've got our assignments and fine.
You got your assignments.
I just think the president has done a marvelous job.
I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm telling you, he's done it. Now
do it again.
Now you need to tell the public what you're doing.
All right.
Again and again.
That's what's the old saying in this business? Tell them again, and then tell them what you told them.
And tell them how you're going to do it one more time.
There you go. All right. The Ed Rollins Addendum. Right. Thanks, Ed, for being here. Good to see you. Iranian hackers threatening to launch cyber attacks on electrical grids, water plants, technology, healthcare companies in the United States, Europe, and the Middle East. The White House has prepared retaliatory sanctions if Iran carries out those cyber attacks. Iran was responsible for hacking dozens of U.S. banks between 2011 and 2013. However, only 45 million Iranians own a computer compared to 254 million in this country who own one. Of course, it could still be very annoying if they do carry out even one successful cyber attack. Joining us tonight, former Secret Service agent, great American, Dan Bongino. Great to have you with us, Dan. Let's start with. Good to see you, Lou. Let's just start with this president and what he is putting up with. This is a man, I think you and I would agree, who's done more than any modern American president. The accomplishments, the achievements, whether it's the economy, foreign policy, you name it, he has been there.
Yep. Yeah, he's been incredible, Lou, and his record frequently gets sidelined by the media who, and by the way, Lou, the media overreaction to Donald Trump, I just want to be absolutely clear on this, is not helping the media and their liberal buddies. It's not. The poll numbers are crystal clear. Let me give you a quick example, Lou. The Russia thing. All right, so there's a verbal misstep. Trump corrects it the next day. I didn't think it was as big a deal as everyone made it out to be, and I don't get into these media outrage
absolutely
campaigns.
Wasn't a big deal.
It wasn't. He corrects it, and what happens? The next day we have Nazism, fascism, Holocaust references. The media overreaction was so over the top, they went right to 10, and what happened? Trump's approval rating didn't move at all. It was 45%, and 79% of Republicans thought he handled the Russia summit fine. What happened?
Absolutely.
The media looked like fools, not Donald Trump.
Well, they're not obviously worried about looking like fools because they have been on parade as such for every day of his presidency.
You know, Lou, I'm trying to, as a former psychology graduate student.
Now you're scaring me, a psychology student. All right.
I never tout educational bona fides. It always makes you look silly. But seriously, in this case, I'm trying to get in the heads collectively of the far-left media people. And what they're doing, they're usually more tactically efficient than this. They understand the MO. I think what's happened here is they're so used to the gaslighting routine, where they lie about Republicans, they lie confidently, and they isolate the public through the truth by collectively forming a narrative. The fact that Donald Trump has circumvented it through Twitter and the bully pulpit, I genuinely think, Lou, they don't know how to respond. And this mass hysteria is kind of like a psychological extinction burst, like they don't know what to do to respond to this man.
You know, because they haven't the intellect or the talent. Anywhere that I can see in the national leadership of the Democratic Party. Keith Ellison, his big contribution this week was to say that borders are an injustice to Mexican citizens who can't compete fairly with American citizens for jobs. I mean, they say they're for the people in the House, the Dems do. They're for other people, not the American people.
Yeah, Lou, you've got this iron triangle of stupidity, right? You've got Democrat activists, you've got career politicians, and you've got 30-year-old media people who've never held a real job. And what's incredible, I'm glad you brought this up, is they're criticizing a guy endlessly. Listen, I'm not saying criticism in the press is American. I'm talking about the overreaction, not the reaction. But these guys have never signed the front of a check, and they're criticizing a guy who's made nearly $1 billion. He's had some missteps here and there, but he's made nearly $1 billion and won the presidency of the United States, Lou, without ever having held political office. But let's hear your opinion, Mr. 30-year-old reporter at the New York Times who just got out of school 5 years ago. Let me hear your opinion on foreign affairs. It's so valuable to the debate.
Yeah, the contributions are immense, obviously, from every one of these national left-wing media outlets. And the left, They're openly now talking socialism when they really mean communism, just as when they talk progressive, they really mean the old liberal Democratic Party. But this new dim organization is something to behold, and they think they're going to win in November. I may be wrong about something. I didn't think that there would be a single Republican who could win who did not attach themselves to the president. There may be a few who will win just because of what the Democrats have done.
Lou, we've been here before. You know, you and I, listen, I was born at night, but not last night. I'm only 43. I'm not that old, but I've seen this before.
There you go, bragging.
Yeah, I look a lot older, I know. But we've been here before. We had the Walter Mondale era where they thought it was a good idea to run openly at a national level about hiking taxes. What happened? They got annihilated at the polls. Reagan won 49 states.
Don't remind them. Don't remind them.
I know, exactly. Well, as a counter-revolution, they had the Democrat Leadership Committee. You had Southern Democrats like Bill Clinton who came in and moderated a bit, and they rescued their party. I don't think they can do it now under Donald Trump, though. I think they're so emotionally involved with derangement syndrome that they can't figure it out.
Not unless they find a Ross Perot. That's the only way it would work. People forget, Bill Clinton didn't even get 50% of the vote when he ran in two successive races. Dan, great to have you with us. Have a great weekend. Dan Bongino, thank you very much. Oh, I've got some bad news. Bill and Hillary Clinton's close friend Tony Podesta, well, has been under scrutiny by federal authorities, but not to worry. He was offered immunity by special counsel Robert Mueller, good old Bob, to testify against Paul Manafort. Podesta's brother is John Podesta, who was chairman of the Clinton 2016 presidential campaign. Funny how that works. And Tony, he once worked with Manafort to lobby on behalf of Ukrainian interests in this very country. And he apparently did not properly register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. I can't imagine how that would happen. The exact same crime that Manafort is charged with. Tony Podesta also accused of failing to register as a foreign agent when he represented the Russian-owned company. Are you ready? Uranium One. Yes, the same Uranium One deal that led Russia to gaining 1/5 of U.S. uranium deposits in exchange for $145 million of donations to the squeaky clean Clinton Foundation. We know it's squeaky clean because the FBI says so. We're learning today that President Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, secretly recorded a conversation with his client. Then candidate Trump discussed a payment to a former Playboy model. That payment never made. Trump told Cohen that if there were any payment, however, it should not be cash. It should be by check so that it could be documented properly. Wow. Joining us tonight, Fox Business legal analyst Greg Jarrett, author of the new book, The Russia Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. Yes, that scheme is still underway. The book hits bookstores next week, July 24th. Great to have you here.
Good to be here, Lou.
John Podesta's brother, Tony. Yes. How lucky could he be?
You know, he received the equivalent of one of these, the Mega Millions ticket from courtesy of Bob Mueller. Sweetheart of a guy. You know, if you're a Clintonista, Clinton longtime friend and ally, you get a free pass, you get immunity. But if you are any way connected to Donald Trump, you know, go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
Everything around the Podesta brothers is really intriguing. Here is Tony Podesta getting immunity from this, facing exactly the same charges as Manafort. And at the same time, his brother, the chairman of the Clinton campaign, participating in the payment, apparently, of monies to create a phony dossier that was used to create a phony FISA warrant by the FBI.
Right.
I wonder how this is working out. Oh, the FBI was led by the colleague and friend, longtime friend of Bob Mueller, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, all the strings and attachments here.
Yeah,
it's a clubby place, that Washington, D.C., and no wonder it's called the swamp.
Yeah, a toxic swamp, indeed.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, all you have to do, Americans are smart. They know that this whole thing is a partisan scam. Just look at the polling data. They know that Bob Mueller's partisan team of lawyers and investigators are driven by personal animus and political disagreement with President Donald Trump. So they're out to get him. And thus the title of my book, The Russia Hoax.
This will be the second reference to the Russia hoax.
Shameless plug, but it comes out on Tuesday.
Tuesday. And I'm sorry, what was the relationship to the book that you were drawing?
The Russia Hoax. This is begun by James Comey, and then his longtime partner, ally, and friend, Bob Mueller, took it over.
Yep. And don't forget his good friend, Hillary Clinton.
Oh, yeah.
So wronged in all of this.
Yeah, it's a shame.
But,
and she lost the presidency. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stunning.
It is. It was a landslide in the Electoral College, which is all that really counts. Great to have you with us, Greg.
Lou, good to be here. Thank you.
Greg Jarrett. And the book is what? It's the Russia what?
The Russia Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. Rolls just right off your tongue.
It does roll.
But the title tells the story.
Right off your tongue. And straight into your bank account.
Yeah.
And let's do this. Let's all be sure that our friends and neighbors are buying the Russia Hoax. Because it'll be very helpful to all of us. The body of public knowledge will rise, just like Mr. Jarrett's bank account.
Oh, my.
Go
to BarnesandNoble.com or Amazon to buy it ahead of time.
President Trump weighing in this evening on the NFL decision to put their new national anthem policy on hold. That amid a pressure from the league's Players Association. President Trump tweeting this, quote, "The NFL national anthem debate is alive and well again. Can't believe it. Isn't it in contract that players must stand at attention hand on heart? The $40 million commissioner must now make a stand. First time kneeling, out for the game. Second time kneeling, out for the season, no pay." The NFL and the Players Union putting out a joint statement. That statement saying that they will neither issue nor enforce new rules related to the national anthem. Now, there's a position, and what a bunch of sorry son of a guns, the owners, because they made a rule and then just blew it up. They are apparently talking about a new policy, but then again, what is a policy but something a little temporary, transitory in the minds of the leadership of the NFL, if you can call it that. Joining us tonight, Dom Giordano, radio talk show host. Philadelphia's WPHT is his home. Tammy Bruce, Washington Times columnist, president of Independent Women's Voice, and Fox Business contributor, and she is home here with us. Great to have you both. Let's start with the NFL, guys. Tammy, what is Goodell doing this time?
You know, this is interesting. You've got the union really has been an issue here, of course, and it's not like Americans have had an experience with unions destroying businesses before. You can ask everybody who used to work at Hostess before that got destroyed. So you're looking at clearly an industry that's fearful. The president at the same time, and all of us who are arguing about this issue, we are also worried about the business of this entity, an incredibly important cultural entity for the United States, a business that employs, obviously, I mean, tens of thousands of people. The stadiums, the people dealing with concessions.
This is a big deal.
It is a huge deal. And it seems like these individuals who are making $40 million a year, and the players making even more, seem to not care or realize that so much more is at stake than... And look, we got the point. We've been dealing with this for so long. We understand what's
the point? I mean, I don't honestly get it, Don. What is the point?
No, Lou, that's because you have an industry here of sports pundits who used to be pretty circumspect about their opinion. Most of them do not like President Trump. They're ungrateful, and they have to cater to people that are millionaires, these players, who can't articulate any position. As a member of a cop's family, the thing that really gets me is the big lie that police are in an epidemic of violence across the country. That seems to be it. And these players would be given tremendous platforms, Lou, if they wanted to come on shows.
You say it's anti-Trump, but I think we have to go back, and just as you've said, remember the incipient point of this was a San Francisco quarterback who was deeply disgruntled, taking on the mantle of social activist against law enforcement in this country. That was the incipient point. It is the fundamental cornerstone of the anthem insult movement amongst those players. Tammy, your thoughts?
I like what you called it, the anthem insult movement, Lou. And,
That's what it is.
The point is this. This will play out in the midterms. Democrats keep on saying, why do you people care about this, meaning Trump voters and conservative voters and patriotic Americans? Yeah. Because we do. That's why.
Yeah, but again, it's a mixture of what matters to President Trump and what he represents, yes, and what we represent as Americans. Respect for the country in general. We hear certain complaints and issues regarding certain communities and the issue of law, justice and law and order, but at the same time, a larger commitment to a community that we're all involved in, which is about people's futures, the ability to make money, the ability to have a job.
It's about the flag, the national anthem, and everything this country stands for.
Represents.
And I think about this. How many presidents can you think of? I think you have to go back to Ronald Reagan to find a president who would have had the guts to say to the NFL, and with all that comes with the NFL in our society and our culture, you're not going to insult the American people, the American flag and anthem, and our heritage. You're going to be respectful. And I
think President Trump, Lou.
Sir?
Yeah, I'm saying that more than most, President Trump, though, knows these guys. He was a former football team owner. He doesn't like how Goodell goes about his business. And he digs deeply into this. It's in one of the front pieces of his mind. And it's very effective because this is something that ought to be resolved pretty easily.
Yeah, but think about how quiet so many people who are leaders in our society have been. How gutless, how lacking in courage. And by the way, their silence in all of this is an insult to this country as well. Because I think most Americans right now, watching this president lead this nation, are pretty well convinced that they have been really overpaying for public service from the people they've elected in both houses on Capitol Hill and often in the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah,
you get the last word, Tammy.
I would just add that this is a reminder, as you're noting, all the other issues come together with this one. It's a symbol of the nature of the attitude toward the country, about entitlements in a way, about a rejection of what this nation stands for, and as a result, why President Trump was elected. So as this goes on, the longer it goes on, it will be a constant reminder on every issue about how the reaction, the result of November 2016 was the right one, and how that revolution needs to continue.
Now, it is, and I misspoke because I started with Tammy, so you get the last word, Dom. I apologize.
Oh, Dom.
Well, Tammy said it
but not until I get a
well.
word in. But not until I get a word in. Very quickly. The idea that this controversy is going on, it should not mask. We've got empirical evidence, as does the NFL. They've lost a tremendous number of viewers on television. Their business is under challenge, and Tammy started with that point.
That's right.
This is a business that is being challenged by the people who have the most to benefit from it personally, aside from Goodell, and that is those highly paid athletes who apparently know no bounds to what they want to get done in terms of being social justice warriors instead of football players.
Lou, that's exactly right. I'm here in the home of the Super Bowl champions. It feels good to say that. And yet I have people that call me that bled for 50 years with the Philadelphia Eagles, did not watch the games this year. And they're being honest about it. That's how painful and difficult this is. Roger Goodell and others are going to have to realize this. But, Lou, I think the players have them over a barrel. Yep. I think this is going to continue in one form or another all the way through November.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. Dom, thanks so much. Tammy, thank you.
Thanks.